Now, good morning. Good morning, Maureen. How are you?
Good morning, Sorcha. How are you this morning?
I'm great. I'm absolutely excited about what we're going to be learning this morning. And I think it's going to be a really, really informative session. No pressure at all on you, Maureen.
Well, look, yeah, I hope so. I hope so. That's my aim.
Good. We have quite a number of people in the room already. So let's see. We have Breda, Elizabeth, Usha, Margaret, Maureen, Jason, Jean, and Barbara. Good morning, everybody. Why don't you all pop into the chat there? Tell us where you're ringing in from and maybe what industry you're in, so we get a bit of an idea. I'm running a poll at the moment for Maureen, just so we get an idea of where everybody's at. And the question is, what is the most important leadership trait for a manager or a remote team? So it'll be interesting to see what the outcome is on that. What do you have something in your head that you're expecting, Maureen, or?
Well, I suppose ideally I'd like to leave it open to the group. I mean, obviously there's a number of leadership traits. And I suppose it's worth saying those leadership traits, as all you guys in the room will know, are also leadership traits that when you're dealing with a team in-house. But I suppose there's one, Sorcha, in particular that I have found over the last number of weeks, that when I've worked with people and they've been having a difficulty, managers and team members, and when there have been difficulties, when I've kind of chiseled down or when we've dug down together, this particular trait was at the heart of it, or was I suppose the root cause of the difficulties or the challenges they were having. So yeah, I do have one in particular, but I'm looking forward to hearing everybody's feedback.
Sorry, I put myself on mute and forgot to take it off. I was just saying there that we kind of catapulted ourselves about 3 years into the future in terms of technology use and remote working. So it's a really good workshop to help enhance what people need at the moment. Just see Jean there. Hi, Maureen, Jean Martin Head of HR Applegreen. I'm delighted to see you.
Hi, Jean. You're very welcome
here. Margaret works in training skills to advanced programs, and lots of requests have come for help with managing remote teams. Fantastic. So we
Margaret.
Absolutely. Maureen, I'm just going to do a quick intro, and we've 4 minutes past 10 now, and we'll take it from there. So good morning, everybody. My name is Sorcha Finucane, and I'm the owner and founder of Trained In. We are absolutely delighted to be hosting, on behalf of Taste Your Success SkillNet, these fantastic upskilling workshops. We're running 60 upskilling workshops between now and the 18th of December, and we want them to be useful for not just you, but also for your teams. So if you see anything coming up, or if there's anything that you'd like to see coming up, please let us know and we'll schedule it in. We schedule about 3 weeks in advance, so we can absolutely accommodate any need, because we're here to, I suppose, to help you. Anybody who's interested in further training can be funded by SkillNet. So I will pop in my email address and Breda in Taste for Success later on, so you can contact either of us if you are interested in more further training for your business. A little bit of housekeeping before we go. We can't see you and we can't hear you, so please make use of the chat facility. I know I'm running a poll there for anybody who was in a bit late, and I'll go through the results of that in a minute. Maureen's going to be asking you a couple of questions as she goes through the presentation, so please use the chat facility. Make use of the time that she has here. So if you have any questions, please pop them into the chat. If you don't want to put a question out publicly, send it directly to me in the chat and I'll ask the question without mentioning who it's coming from. And what else? We're going to use an interactive whiteboard, first time we're doing it today. So I will be popping in a link into the chat, which will bring you to another window where you can type on a whiteboard that we'll all be able to view. So it's an experiment, shall we say, but it's great for engagement. And that's about it from terms of housekeeping and the intro. But Maureen, before we start, tell me, what are we going to be learning today?
Okay, so in the time that we have, what I thought would be of best value to everybody there would be to give you three tips that you walk away with at the end of the workshop. 3 practical, tangible tips that you can put into play. I mean, maybe you'll put 1 in, 2, but at least you will walk out of the door with 3 tangible tips. And I suppose just to give you the tiniest bit of insight into those tips as to where they've come from. So, Sorcha, as you and I know, we've been backwards and forwards on this, trying to distill down the key tips. So they've really been based on, I suppose, my experiences with managers coming to us, expressing, maybe difficulties that they're experiencing particularly over the last few months, and also employees. And when I've worked with teams, some of the difficulties that have arisen and come out of that. So there's that input, but I suppose also, you and I both do a lot of research, so it's also emerging. There's a huge report done by Deloitte, which was very good, and a number of other organizations. But in particular, I'd say it's probably real life experience talking to real life managers, talking about their difficulties.
Yeah, absolutely, 100% agree. And just going back on to that, the result of the poll is that 100% of the people on the call think that trust is the most important trait. Is that what you were expecting?
Actually, I'm delighted that that's the one. Yeah, that is the one. Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, that's good to know. That was the right answer, folks. Okay, so Maureen, I'll start your presentation. I'm going to turn my camera off, but just to let everybody know that I'm still here in the background. We are going to do Q&A at the end, so I'll let Maureen go through her presentation, unless I see something that is really important that we can't move on. So Maureen, I'm going to turn my camera off. I'm still here, so don't worry. Excellent. And I will let you take over.
Okay, and Sorcha, will you keep me, if I'm running behind on time, you might just give me a nod on that. Okay, thanks a million. Okay, great stuff, guys. So we'll jump straight into it. So, as Sorcha said, in terms of what we will be covering today, what we're covering is to get the most out, how to get the most out of your team, top traits to develop, and in terms of motivating your team. Okay, so kicking off with my first tip, and I suppose the one thing again that has come across from so many of the managers and employees that I've talked to out there, we have a tendency to try to replicate what happens in the office when we're working remotely. So my first thought for you today is, do not try to replicate what goes on in the office. And what I mean by that is, the culture is different. So recognize that culture is different, okay? So the really important thing is to set yourself up right, okay, from day number 1. So get your processes right, take time, explain the processes to your team, make sure they understand them. So you might be sitting there saying, well, look, I'm already well into this. I worked with the team a few weeks ago, and it's never too late to do this. It's never too late to start. It's never too late to begin and say, okay, this is how we are going to do it. So I'm not going to hugely get into, obviously, technology today, but I suppose it's about, obviously, you're out there already using different forms of technology to manage your remote teams. And all I would say to you is that in using that technology, just be absolutely clear which ones we're using for which. So, you know, if you need something like an urgent reply on a task that you've set or a query or whatever, you know, what method, what channel will I use for that? So you might be really clear on it. Are all your teams super clear on that? And again, I've just found that that's one of the areas that has caused unnecessary, I suppose, hassle or conflict or wherever, where there was no need for that to be the case. So, you know, whether you're using whichever platforms you're using, and I won't get into the various ones because, you know, so many of them are out there and so many people are using different ones. So the other thing that I would say on that is like the chat rooms. We just find the chat rooms are fantastic because you can leave your chat room and go in, and I can post a query that I have on something that maybe is not time sensitive. So again, it's to, you know, to say to people, look, you can post something in the chat room, but, you know, I may not get to that until 5 o'clock this evening or whatever. Okay, I hope that's clear enough. Okay, so it's just make sure everybody gets it, repeat it. If you have new people onboarding, make sure they absolutely understand the channels. One thing that I find really useful to do with teams sometimes is to get somebody who you've trained in, another team member, to explain it to you know, somebody, a new recruit, and that works really well on both counts. Okay, one thing that I am really strong on, whether it's in office or online, is that you would have a group conversation. And that at that group conversation, so it's a team meeting, but so often, you know, you have team meetings and you agree various actions from them. I suppose what I'm really saying here is I would really recommend that you go in with your group and that you have a team meeting where you agree ground rules. And those ground rules are different to the ground rules we've been using back in the office. And what I mean by ground rules is that they're non-negotiable. So the team agree them. So one thing, for example, would be that, you know, we have a Monday morning meeting, 8:30, cameras on. You know, again, it's really to iron out and to be proactive and to avoid possible areas that are going to cause you maybe potential difficulty further down the line. So I have found in talking to managers, if say there's a difficulty with the team responding in a certain way to certain requests or whatever, they feel that it, particularly over the last few months, because you're not eyeballing people, that it can cause difficulties. So you're seen to be retrospectively managing, or a lot of employees have said to me, God, there's so much micromanaging. Like they're on my manager phones me every day at 8:30. So in that case, I went back to the manager and said, look, you know, of course it's perfect to check in with your team 8:30 every morning. But the key is that you tell them in advance. You tell them in advance. And I'll just touch on one thing here that I think goes right to the heart of this. So often we tell people what they should do. You know, we tell them that you need to get your whatever returns in, you know, you need to carry out certain processes in certain ways. I don't know if the rest of you would agree, and you can pop it up on the whiteboard or whatever, if you agree or disagree with that. I think so often we forget the why. We forget the why. So we tell them what to do, but it's so important. We're not robots. So it's so important that you tell me why I must do something. So if there's like 10 steps to completing a form, and, you know, I think after doing this kind of week on week, I can get there by skipping some in the middle. It's so important that you tell me why. You know, will it impact maybe on customers? Could it impact on customer safety? Could it impact on, if we're doing something on compliance, could that impact on my compliance? And, you know, could you Could your organization either, damage their reputational brand name, or, what is the why? So always just take that little bit of time. I, from what I'm picking up from people, I think that's even more important right now, to emphasize that why. Okay, so moving on. Again, so my next part of that idea of setting yourself up right for success. Set your expectations clearly. So I need that urgently. Okay. One person's urgent. So, Jean, Rita, Maureen, Soraka, we may all have a different viewpoint of what urgent is. Does that mean prioritize it, drop everything else? So just be really clear on your language, and don't forget that it will mean different things to different people. I hope that makes sense to you. Again, just pop up a note if that doesn't for any reason. Okay, so the second point so let's talk about this one on traits. What are our key traits to develop? So what traits do we have? Anything back from that poll, Soraka?
The poll, Maureen, was 100% for trust.
Trust. Did we have anything else on that?
No, that poll is finished, but the whiteboard is open. So
okay.
At any stage throughout the this presentation, I've popped the link into the chat there, and people are using it at the moment. I can see everything popping up on the screen. The whiteboard is anonymous, so anything that you put up here is going to be anonymous. We don't know who it is. So at whatever stage you want to, Maureen, I can share the screen so we can all view what's coming up on the whiteboard. You might want to do it after your presentation, or if you want to. So whatever stage you want, let me know and we can review it.
Okay, grand. Okay, so we'll do it after the presentation, because we agreed that we leave some time to pull a few strands together. So that being one of the key strands, and we might ask people, or you might comment on if you already use something like those ground rules, or if you think they would be effective for you.
Great.
Okay, so in terms of traits, so we am I okay to go ahead, Soraka?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so we use a psychometric tool called Harrison Assessments, and it's all about, looking at people's behavior. Okay, so one of, I suppose, a self-evident fact is that if you know your own behavior, and if you know the impact of that behavior on your team, that can have a huge impact on how productive your team are, how well the whole team works together, how you can build a cohesive team, in other words. Now, back to my studies. So there have been quite a few studies done in terms of what are the most important traits for a leader to possess. And I suppose in particular now, today, for the next few minutes, we're talking about in the context of remote working. So there's obviously a number of traits that a leader needs, okay? But today, what I'd like to zone in on is what your team is looking for from you as a leader in managing a remote team. So one of the key findings from our reports is that teams are looking, safety is the driver. They want to feel psychologically safe. So if you think about that, and if you backtrack from that, that means that your team must implicitly trust you, and you must trust your team. So that trust works two ways. And I suppose if I were to log up the number one challenge that I've heard over the last number of months, because as I said in section number one, when we were talking about setting yourself up successfully, most of us didn't have the luxury of setting ourselves up, in managing teams. That was kind of thrust upon us, if you like. So as a result, I think a lot of managers, I think a lot of us have gone into maybe a different mindset. And, you know, from everything we're hearing, a lot of micromanagement has been taking place. And, you know, your check-in, is that perceived as, whoa, that's brilliant. You know, John is checking in to find out how I'm getting on. Or might that be perceived as micromanaging me? I was talking to somebody a few weeks ago, a manager, and she was managing her own team, and we scheduled a call or whatever, and it was about, you know, coming up to 10 to 1. And she said, oh, look, I'm really sorry. Can I phone you back in 15 minutes? So she did. And she said, look, that was my manager. And I always feel that if I don't answer the phone when he calls, that he'll think I'm, literally to use her words, I'm putting out a load of washing. Looking out the window today, you wouldn't be rushing out to put out any washing, but it was the whole premise that she felt that if she didn't pick up that phone to him, that his perception was that she wasn't available, she was doing something else or whatever. So I'm going to tie my first section on the ground rules in with this section, which is the trust. So the two of them go together. So I think for people who maybe have difficulties, you know, getting away from the micromanaging piece, is that really being done? Will it be delivered? I think part of that starts at the ground rule stage. So if you're really clear with your team on the ground rules, and don't forget they have bought into it, so they've agreed with those ground rules, then we kind of fast forward now into the whole area of trust, okay? So it's about you trusting your team to do the best they can. And what I would say here is, you know, what's the best way to develop trust? I think it was Ernest Hemingway who said, well, the best way to develop trust is, the best way to find out if you can trust somebody is when you actually trust them. So when you trust them. So yeah, you have to give it, you have to let go a little bit. It's like when you delegate in order to test that premise. And here's my one real tip on this one. So in terms of trusting somebody, you've got to focus in on the results. If you're going to step away from managing their activities, so how are you getting on with that report? How many pages have you done now? Did you get the returns in by 6 o'clock last night? It's to focus on results, okay? So it's to talk to them about the big picture. It's to talk to them about, okay, guys, so it's at that, you know, I'm a great believer in your weekly meeting to give an overview of what's going on in the week. So at that meeting, if you move away from, you know, all the tiny little pieces that your team are doing to the big results, so what each one is expected to deliver. I hope that makes sense. So it's about that shift in mindset from activities to results. So it's about saying, so John, you know, the plan is being delivered to HQ, you know, on this Friday. And so we need your accounts to be signed off. We need your report on that piece. We need your survey findings to be in on, you know, to be in for that report. So, and it's again about asking open questions. So when do you think you could have that to me? So if he's saying Thursday evening, well, maybe you're saying, well, maybe it's better if we Wednesday and we review it. But it's all about the results, okay? So when I'm talking to you about that now and that trust, so trust is obviously a two-way road, two-way street. So how do you engender that trust among your staff? So I mean, maybe that's one that you want to pop something on the chat or on the whiteboard there. Just one, I suppose, one activity or one focus that I'm always very strong on is, I think it's that conversation. So the conversation, if you remember, I'm going to take you back to tip number one. So tip number one was all about setting yourself up for success, and those ground rules being crucial for that. And then the ground rules, and then connecting that to the trust piece. And the trust piece is connected to the results. Okay? So, and the trust piece is about, none of us are robots. So the trust piece is connected to our goals. So one thing I also find is that when we've moved to online, what I've really noticed, and again, I'd be really interested in your feedback on this, things are happening in the organization. Maybe you're opening new, or you've plans to open maybe new branches in the UK. Maybe, there's a new initiative or a new innovation coming down the line. And all that is being done at a corporate level or organizational level. So how much of that is being translated down to your team members? How much of that is being translated? Do I still feel part of, Applegreen if I'm working out in, Donamead from my home? So how are you going to make sure that I'm still linked in to those kind of our overall direction, where we're all going? So I suppose, again, it's back to step number one, the processes. So it's about finding a way that you will make sure that each of your team members are tuned into that. So when I said that it's a two-way street in terms of trust, I think one of the ways you display trust by saying, okay, right, I'll expect that report, and, in whatever words you find, I know that you will do a really good job on that, because you know how important it is to the team. So again, it's the why. So sometimes we ask for things, and we ask for things in a hurry, and we might reprioritize things, but do we take the time to tell them why that's important? So what I'm trying to do here is, rather than slavishly go through slides, is to try and connect a few points as we're working our way through it. So I'd be very up for saying to a team, I trust you. I absolutely trust you. And, I trust you to the point that, if a mistake is made, that I have your back. And again, that comes out of the ground rules. I have your back. We can make mistakes, mistakes. But if something is being repeated, or if it's through lack of team effort, then that's a different issue. But it's that whole idea of trust being a two-way stream. Is that okay? I hope that makes sense for everybody. Okay, so then the third point was, we've distilled down these points. So then the third point that we wanted to talk about was setting really clear expectations and the trust. So the processes. So I've set my processes. I've set my ground rules. I'm really encouraging those weekly meetings. I'm also encouraging that you have an opportunity to, maybe post a concern in a chat room, maybe that I can go online and, have a buddy session with another employee. And so I've linked then my processes to the traits that I have to develop. So I did talk about the trust one being the number one trait. Obviously, there'll be other traits that you will want to develop in your remote team, and it might be interesting for us all to have a chat about that at the end. So it's about becoming really aware of that. And in our psychometric tool, we run a report for, the ideal traits for a remote manager. And surprise, surprise, that whole trust element is right up there. Equally, there will be traits that you want to develop in your team. Now, they'll vary for all of your different teams, okay? Like one that springs to mind is maybe to be proactive. So you encourage people, you encourage your team members to be proactive. So that would happen at your Monday morning, or what, that team meeting. It's really important that, we're going to be in this situation for a while, getting them to understand why being proactive is a positive. I mean, not only that, you guys all know, if your team are more proactive, you'll end up having a much more productive, and they will have a much more satisfying work scenario. I mean, they'll have a more satisfying work scenario, rather than procrastinating, maybe waiting for the manager to check up on them. So by giving them the trust, and by telling them, combining those two, by telling them about being proactive, what are you actually doing here? You're encouraging their own development, and that's something that I'm going to touch on now in a few minutes. So I'll move on to the next one. So the last area that we were going to cover here was, that how do you motivate your staff? So it's really a combination of 1, 2, and now what we're going to talk about here. I didn't need to come here and tell you about really clear communications, because that's absolutely paramount. But I suppose what I would say about expectations is, and frequently, again, when I'm talking to managers, coaching managers, and they tell me that they're running into difficulties, one of the areas that is very obvious is that they've got their expectations in their heads, and that they assume, well, of course the team would know. And, it might have been maybe shared at a team meeting or whatever once. But it's that idea of expecting the team members to pick up on your expectations. So Woody Allen once famously said that the secret to a happy life is low expectations. Okay? It's a good one to remember sometimes, particularly at home. Low expectations. But what I would say here is that the secret to a happy and productive remote team is very, very, very clear expectations. When I work with managers and team members, I cannot remember on one occasion a team member saying, criticizing a manager, or saying that they have a difficulty with the manager because they over-explain, or because they over-communicate, or they tell them something too often. It's generally the lack of that. So what I mean by really clear communications, because I know that's kind of a vague and kind of, shapeless term that's bandied around in every organization, isn't it? We need better communications. What I'm talking about better communications is that it's really super clear. So again, going back to that thing, if I say I want something urgently, what does that mean? So using clear language and being really explicit. And again, it's about checking in, making sure that they understand that they know the expectation. And again, if the expectation is that you would like them to develop some traits, and they'll be different for different team members, but maybe one is proactive. Well, what does proactive mean? If I'm Johnny sitting out in Santry, plugging away, doing my best, well, you'll have to spell out what proactive is. And again, that's engendering trust, but you're also developing your people. And whatever traits you choose, and we various ones on the Harrison assessments, they're the ones that you're engendering. So I'm going to move on through this. Okay, so really clear communications. So then I would just say, again, I'm going to re-emphasize the idea of I still want to feel part of a team. I still want to feel part of an organization. So please find a way of telling me what's going on at organizational level. Give me the broader picture so I really feel part of that. None of us are robots, and it comes down to our purpose for going to work. And again, it's connected back into that why. If you're telling me that I need to take these 10 steps, you had better be really clear on why I need to do that. So is everybody getting a chance to contribute? So, I mean, I'd be interested in your feedback on that, and I'm going to finish up now. But one way, Sorcha has mentioned various ways that you can get an opportunity to contribute. I found those chat rooms, I've recommended them to a few organizations or a few people that I've worked with, and they've worked really well because you can pop something up there. You don't need, it can be anonymous on the whiteboard rather, and people can come to it, and you can take out some of those maybe at the next meeting, or you as a manager can address them, whatever you feel is most appropriate. So again, just what I've said there in terms of using whiteboards. One small tip, look out for the people who are not contributing. We can see it when we're in a room, can't we? But look out for people who are not contributing or not communicating, and encourage them to communicate. One thing that I have done with a remote team is, particularly where we had a few very strong contributors and a few not so strong. So what I did was that on a Monday morning meeting, that everybody came in with an idea. And if they didn't have an idea, even in the beginning, it was like one funny story. They could contribute one funny story. So again, it's that communication. And I suppose it's worth saying, and I know this is something, Jean, that you're particularly strong on, that idea of, that check-in, just that 2-minute check-in, that eyeballing a person face to face. How are they doing? Outside, nothing to do with work. So I'd say that is something that is worth trying to build into your team as well. So that there is just that, that informal check-in. I know some people do it through a virtual coffee or whatever, but you as the manager to take ownership of that. Sorcha, I'm conscious of my time. So
you're okay on time. You're only at 37 minutes.
Okay.
So
okay.
Another, let's go or whatever. Yeah.
Okay. Terrific.
You can keep going on that presentation, and I just encourage people to use the whiteboard because it can be really effective. But we can do it live as well. So
yeah,
you keep going.
Great. So I suppose, so what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to very, very quickly summarize what I see as the really key points in terms of building a team online and having a more productive team online. So the first thing is about setting up those processes really clearly. So what I want is that you go out of today's session with, I suppose, just 3 kind of consolidated ideas rather than a lot of more random thoughts. So one is set up your processes properly. If you feel your processes are set up brilliantly, fantastic. Maybe worth a review, 3 months down the line. Are they working for everybody? Is everybody clear? Is everybody really committing on those? Is there anything we could do a bit better? Okay. So processes, it's not the same as online. So if you want to check in with people, how are you going to do that? I think that clarity around, what tool we use for what type of communication, I think that really eliminates a lot of hassle. So I would say getting those systems set up really clearly is really, really super important. We could talk for 3 hours on management traits, but what we're focusing in on today is thinking about traits that you need to develop. So it's now an opportunity for you. You have your process in place, you've agreed to the ground rules. And what I mean, and just the ground rules being that everybody buys into them. So then when we've done that, what are the traits that I want to develop? So I can now slightly focus more on my traits and how I'm managing this team, because if everything is running a little bit more smoothly in the background, then I can kind of sit back, exhale, and think about developing my team and think about my own traits and think about the way that I manage my team. And I suppose the one thing that managers are always surprised at when we run the Harrison assessments is, how they show up for their teams. So they might think that they are being very straightforward and direct, but their teams may see them as being very blunt. So it's worth thinking about those traits and we can send you on a separate presentation on, how those traits work and how they're assessed. So they're, it's about your own traits, but it's also about you as it's about employees' traits as well. And what I would say there is that if you're the employee sitting in this room and you've listened to, maybe we don't have ground rules, we don't have clear communication, that's definitely something that, as a team member, being proactive, that might be a really worthwhile contribution to your team, that you say, we need to sit down and review our processes, we need to agree ground rules. Okay, so the second whole area, which we will talk about jointly now in a few minutes, is the traits to develop. And then the third tip is, it's a joint one between expectations. So setting up really, really clear expectations. So everybody knows exactly what is expected from them and why, and tell them why. So it's expectations, and it's about super clear communication. So that super clear communication means that I'm not forgetting my role as manager, that you need to know what's going on in the organization. Also, that I'm having a conversation with you, an overall conversation, like, how are you getting on? What development needs do you have going forward? What's working for you? What isn't? Maybe a new project that somebody would like to work on. Maybe they want to go back to some kind of education next year. They want to enhance their learning. So they wanted to enhance their development in some way. So the connection between me as an employee working in my back bedroom with all of the, I suppose, challenges that brings. So give me something more, hook me back into that lovely, lively organization. So, so something like the whiteboard now becomes maybe those water cooler moments, but set those things up so that there is a two-way flow in communication. So I hope that in those 3 tips that you've got something that you might be able to take back to your team to help you build a stronger, more cohesive team. So thank you very much for listening to this, and back to you, Sorcha, I suppose, just to have that overall conversation.
Great, and I'm looking forward to this. Your presentation is fantastic, by the way, Maureen. Let me just share this whiteboard. So this is what everybody has been writing in at the moment. So if you haven't written in anything, please click on the link that's in the chat. All comments on this are anonymous. So we can just read through it. So basically, just so I can tell you how to add something to it. On the bottom right-hand corner, there is a pink, let me just turn my camera off for the moment. This pink arrow or cross down here in the bottom right-hand corner. If you click on that, you will be able to write a comment, or if you double click. So let's just have a look at some. This is interesting, really looking to refine webinar functioning when online, or find the most effective alternative channel or online platform. I think, like, remote working, in my perspective, it's here to stay. So finding the right channel to use, the easiest solution for everybody is a must. And there's so many different tools out there. And some of them can be clunky and cumbersome and require downloads and things like that. That's why I like this one, Webinar Jam, because you don't need to download anything. And you can record all of your sessions then for future use, or for reflection on meetings that you've held that people couldn't attend because they were called away or something happened. And especially in hospitality and retail, that happens all the time. And you can see who's logged in and who's watched sessions, so you can track it. And
I love this facility. It's great.
The Padlet, I think, is fantastic. It's a really good way of getting interaction from people. But
exactly. So do you want to do your MC piece and go through those?
Yeah, let's go through them. So that was the first one. So it's really interesting. So whoever wrote that, if you want to send me an email to circa@trained.ie, I can have a chat with you and give you my opinions, because I did a lot of research and some tips, so that's no problem. And maybe we could look at hosting a webinar or something like that, or a workshop on something like that. And then there's another comment: trust is one thing, but as you say, having clear expectations and direction is crucial, especially to those who need constant direction. I think that's a good one. Because as you know, Maureen, there's people who work on their own initiative, and then there's people who need constant direction. And when they finish the task, they're, well, what do you want to do next? Or what will I do next?
Yes.
So and that's where, I suppose, going back to what you deliver in, Maureen, is goals, setting goals, and not just company goals, but personal goals. So everybody knows what direction everybody is going in. Yeah. Let me see. Ask people how they're feeling at the start of every meeting.
Yeah.
In the interactive whiteboard, it's all anonymous. I heard that before at, I think it was one of these workshops that we delivered, where if everybody's sitting, because I see there's another comment there about team meetings. If team meetings are not effective face-to-face, there can be a big jump for managers and team members to move to remote.
Yeah.
And that's all very well and good, but when you're remote, especially when you can't see people, you still want to ensure that the engagement is there. And I think this is a really good way of doing it, because they're how should I put it? They feel better in knowing that it's anonymous. And
yes,
I think the anonymity is, I can never pronounce that word, is key to a lot of people. So
gives them comfort. Yeah.
Yeah, but if you were imagining yourself in a boardroom setting where face to face, and some people are like really excited and into it, and some other people are like not interested. If you ask them to tell you how they're all feeling through this anonymous platform at the very start, you get a gauge of the level of interest in the room before you even start.
Absolutely.
And it can change the tone of your meeting and your delivery straight away. So I thought, I just think it's a good.
It's a very good one.
Yeah, explaining to your team and communicate the why is the crucial part to make things clear. Yeah, why are we doing things? Why is it important? What happens if it doesn't? If we don't do it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, Maureen, I totally agree. It's highly important to keep in touch with the team and keep the lines of communication open. I also like an end of week check-in and celebrate the successes of the week and the highlight priorities. Yeah, that's a good
Lovely.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you guys, who are, when you have remote teams, do you trust them, or do you, is there a check-in every morning where you have to send a text to say I'm on, or is there emails? My personal experience was that I took on 5 interns at the end of May, and I never actually met any of them in person. And they were a couple in Tipperary, some in Waterford, some in Longford, and it was all remote, and you have no choice but to trust them. So it's tough, especially when you're busy and you can't be checking in on people all the time because you've got your own work to do, you know. Let's see what else there. So important to also encourage individuals to show initiative and be resourceful to deal with the new normal.
Yes.
Employees should be rewarded for initiative. Yeah, I agree with that. Have any of you had some really good tips that worked for yourselves in your own business, or any tips to share with any of us? Because it would be really interesting to know what you are actually doing.
Yeah.
Let me see, what am I missing? There's more coming in here. So important to also encourage individuals to show initiative. Oh, sorry, I just read that one. If team meetings are not effective, oh no, I read that one. Trust is one thing. Trust is one thing, but as you say, having clear, oh no, I read that one. Totally trust the team, but keep contact during the day by using chat option in Teams. I also like to use Teams video. Yeah, Teams is good. The thing with Teams I found though is that you have to download the software, and some people find it difficult to use. So just make sure if you're using something like that that you
everybody
have an
finds
internal training session. Or what I find really good as well, there's a tool called Vidyard, Vidyard, that will allow you to record your screen. So you can do a really easy how-to video where you can record your screen and show people how to use Teams or something like that, and then just send the video to everybody. Human aspect, looking at individuals and how they are coping with working remotely, setting company expectations. Workers are now always in the office, and the temptation to dabble can creep into life, disrupting the balance. Yeah.
That's a very good point. I mean, we could do a whole separate one on, productivity. And, I just very quickly on that one, Sorcha, I was talking to a manager, and, he said when he started in during COVID, like working remotely, one of the things was he just found his, it wasn't adhering to any kind of normal hours. So one of the ground rules that they set was that they were really, really going to try and to cut off at 5:30 or 6 o'clock, whatever their cut-off time was. And it just, rather than saying, oh, sure, I can do that later. So it really focused the mind in terms of being like as productive as you can be. I know things come up afterwards, and I know sometimes we're so busy dealing with the to-do list during the day that sometimes to write something even that takes a bit more headspace, can run on into the evening. But I think, again, it's setting that, it's like step number one there, setting yourself up for success. At least if you set it up, if the intention is there to, be as productive as possible, even when you're working from home. Yeah. I definitely think that intention helps.
I see another one there. Totally agree, Maureen. I think this is one of the first ones at the start of your presentation. Once they feel value to the task or request, you get buy-in. Buy-in is huge.
Huge, yeah.
Huge. Yeah. Responsibility. So giving a team or a person responsibility can see them thrive.
Lovely. Yeah.
And then I suppose you go into accountability as well. Then if they're responsible for something, are they also the accountable person for it as well? So you can start measuring. And yes, Maureen, I totally agree. It's highly important to keep in touch with the team and keep the lines of communication open. I also end the week with celebrate success. I think, did I read that one out already? Ensure my team is thorough with the process. I use Teams to interact with the team. Yeah, so a lot of people using Teams. Does anyone have any questions for Maureen? And have you found the use of the whiteboard useful? Don't worry if it looks like there's not enough space there, because you can. It keeps adding and adding and adding.
Yes. Yeah.
So don't worry about that. Maureen, anything else that you think that we should add in? Sorry, I'm working off two screens here, so excuse me.
Well, I suppose just I suppose by way of putting a thread around the whole thing, I suppose today's conversation was very much based around the mindset that we all need to get into in terms of managing remotely. And assess and thinking about the traits that we need to develop. So today's session was, the plan, and I hope you got something out of it. The plan was to get you thinking about, as a manager and as a team, like how do you build this team? Like how to create a really good team culture, how to build those mindsets. And I think for me, it's so important once you realize, look, it's not the same as the office. And then finding out, well, what are their, just finding out what's working for them, what's working for you, what's not working. And again, that comes into that tip number one, setting up the processes. And whether it's on site or off site, the value that I've seen teams get from those doing the ground rules. So we call them different things. There can be non-negotiable standards, or a word that I've actually started using with a lot of teams or a lot of people working remotely over the last few months is, habits. What habits do we want to build up as a team? Because maybe it's a less scary word than standards or whatever. I do like the ground rules because everybody gets it. So if everybody knows that one of the things I hear managers, I don't know about all of you joining us today, how strong of an issue this is for you, but sometimes people not turning on their cameras can be such a turn off because I don't know if you're engaging with me. I don't know if you're doing another email. I don't know if you're feeding your dog. It's just crazy at the moment because everything has changed. So I think if there's, I suppose the one point that I'd like to leave you thinking about is if you create the ground rule in a really strong way, and if you say that's going to be one of our habits, then when you go and you say to, Miriam, you don't have your Miriam, we all need, we need the cameras on. I'm now not micromanaging Miriam. I'm reminding her of the ground rules, and the rest of her team will chime in with that. So look, I'm sure I've done enough talking, and possibly too much talking. So
no, I completely agree with everything that you said, and I think it was really informative. And for anybody who's on the call, I see there's a lot of thanks coming in from Elizabeth. Thanks, Maureen and Circa. Really enjoyed the presentation. From Anne, very interesting and useful. And then on the whiteboard, very interesting session. Very informative, ladies, and informative and practical was one that came up as well. So I think, Maureen, listen, thank you so much for your time. I think it was really informative and it was great to have you here. And thanks to everybody for your support and for participating. If you want to watch the session again, or if you need to forward it on to anybody, you will receive a recording of this in about an hour or 2 hours after we finish. We're finishing now. So if anybody has any difficulties or doesn't get it, please just pop me an email and we can arrange. And don't forget, we've got lots more interesting workshops coming up next week, which could be of interest to you. And I will actually pop them into the chat there, or maybe anybody who's interested, I'll send you everybody an email next week. But some really good things on how to use Canva, personalities for communication, sales, and a bit of wellness then on Friday towards the end of the week. But not just yourselves, everybody can attend. So don't just register yourself. You can send it on to all of your teams and make use of these workshops and help your teams upskill. That's what we're here for. Great. Maureen, thank you again so much. And
I just to wish everyone good luck with the remote working and remote teams.
Absolutely. And have a fantastic day, and we'll catch up with you all soon. Thank you, everybody. Bye for now.
Thank you very much.